All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on Principal Registered Apprenticeships. Really excited for folks to hear from some dynamic speakers that we have with us today. My name is David Donaldson with the National Center for Grow Your Own, and excited to have you with us today. A little bit about National Center for Grow Your Own, if you're not familiar. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that actually formed 4 years ago this month, which is exciting to see what's been accomplished over this time. And ultimately, we started with the goal of, which people used to laugh at, but it was, could we create a world where you could become a teacher for free and get paid to do so? I'm excited to share that states like North Dakota, Alaska, and Virginia are showing that it is possible in their respective states and states all across the country that it is possible to create this world. And now they're also doing it for the principalship, and that's what brings you all here today. A little more about us. One of the things that we offer to states, we also have a separate district network, but is this National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching State Network. It actually launched back in August of 2022 with 7 states. Today, I'm pleased to announce we have 51 members, which includes 47 states plus the Virgin Islands, Guam, Department of Defense, and Washington, D.C. We meet typically every 4 to 6 weeks. North Dakota, Virginia, and Alaska have all been very kind and willing to share their expertise with other state members previously. And every session is completely off the record, and it gives a chance for states to ask questions about, why did you take that approach, or what can you learn from this? We usually have states present, and then, we like to internally before we do something like an external webinar like this. And so, again, I'm really excited for what you all will get to learn from these amazing states today. Should you be one of the states not colored in this map and you work for a state agency, either the state education agency or the state apprenticeship agency, please feel free to complete. We have a link in the chat, a form you can complete, or if you're a school district, we have a separate network for school districts as well if you want to be a part of that. Oh, and sorry, Ben, it's completely free, no strings attached in this space. On the next slide, unfortunately, not completely free, but in just a matter of a couple weeks, we have our third annual national convening on registered apprenticeships and teaching. It's only 2 weeks away, and we're on a wait list now, but still feel free to, if the cold is just getting to you and you need an escape, come and see us in the Big Easy. We're excited to have 385 people so far. You can still sign up for the wait list, and our colleagues at NASDAQ, we're checking it with them every day. And so we'll have folks, including the current Assistant Secretary of Elementary and Secondary Education, Kirsten Baszler, former U.S. Secretary of Education, John Keene. We also have the state soups from Alaska, Arkansas, and Tennessee, as well as 4 National Teachers of the Year. And even some of the states that are presenting today will be presenting in New Orleans. And so feel free to sign up for that, and there'll be a link in the chat for the convening as well. And so a little bit of background before we jump to the states, just high-level history of K-12 principal registered apprenticeships in case you're new to this space. In 2023, the principal occupation was approved by the U.S. Department of Labor to be eligible for registered apprenticeship. I had the privilege of authoring that with Lori Matsky, who you're going to hear from today, as well as her former state soup at the time and now Assistant Secretary, Kirsten Baszler. And so once that occupation was approved, just like teaching had been approved back in November of 2021, it allowed for the first time ever apprenticeship funding to be used to help fund principal pipelines, which is a much needed help and can be blended and braided with things like Title II funding and other sources. And then in 2024, North Dakota and NCGYO put out a playbook, just a free resource for folks to use if it could be beneficial to them. Just want to thank my colleague Ben Gagney Maynard, who's on this call, and Miles Woodall, who were the lead authors on that document. And that is available on our webpage. That will put a link into the chat. It's just ncgyo.org/resources. And then in 2025, just actually last month, Lori and I got the good news that the U.S. Department of Labor approved our K-12 principal national guideline standards. And so a little bit more on those national guideline standards on the next slide. And so, what those national guideline standards do, it allows for any state or district can use it to help streamline the approval of their respective program, more so in what's known as Office of Apprenticeship states. Office of Apprenticeship or OA states or states that are still under the direct jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Labor. I will say, majority of states are state apprenticeship agency states now, and you can still take an NGS to them, but every state is going to have its own unique ways that they handle certain things, and maybe certain I's you have to dot or T's you have to cross. To be clear, the NGS is just an informative document that could be useful, same as the playbook that we did previously. And, any state can use these as an example. I want to be clear about that. And I think we're going to hear from that from states like Alaska and Virginia today, as well as North Dakota, that anything you do in this space in the principal pipeline work, it needs to be adapted for your local values or priorities. The NGS, it's a helpful document. To be frank, it's full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It doesn't create anything new, but it can be useful as you're trying to get your program approved. Again, I would say what's actually more useful is the playbook that came out back in July of 24, is that gives case studies and step-by-step examples of getting programs registered. And frankly, what's going to be more useful is you attending a session like this today, hearing directly from 3 different states that have been running their programs and the lessons learned that they've gained over their time. And so with that, we have 3 speakers today. Kelly Manning from the Alaska Department of Ed, Rob Gilstrap from Virginia Department of Education, and Lori Matsky from the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. Kelly, I also just realized I misspoke. It's the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development. D, my apologies there. And Kelly, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to you to start and kick things off. Thank you so much for being here today. Feel free to come off mute.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm honored to be here. Kelly Manning. I'm our Deputy Director for the Division of Innovation and Education Excellence at the Department of Education and Early Development in Alaska. It's a mouthful, I know. But essentially, our division is where our apprenticeship and our teacher retention and recruitment work lives. And I'm excited to share about our principal registered apprenticeship work. Ben, do you want to pull up? There you go, our slide. Thank you. So one of the things I want to highlight is that, David, I think, did a nice job of laying that foundation of why principal registered apprenticeship, like what is it that you can get from this pathway that is different from your standard pathways? And for Alaska, our turnover is more acute than most parts of the country. We recently had a update on our principal and teacher turnover, and our principal turnover sits about 35% as of 2024, with rural remote Alaska sitting at 55% turnover. So for many of our districts, half of their principals are turning over every year. So not only does that mean that our districts have to address the principal vacancy, but also the impact that that leadership turnover has on the teachers and the teacher retention. So as we have been thinking about the principal pathway, one of the things that we really highlighted in our work was this idea of building retention leaders for our Alaska education workforce. And so our program is very much targeted not just at creating an alternate pathway, but also building that pathway to really highlight retention strategies that school level leaders can employ to retain educators and to reduce burnout of principals so that they are more likely to stay. And so that is the central focus for Alaska's program, as far as the standards and the goals, is creating alternate pathways to build retention leaders. So I'll just go over some of the basics. Right now we have two different pathways available through two of our universities. We were approved in October of 2025 by our Office of Apprenticeship in Alaska for our principal pathway. Our University of Alaska Anchorage and our University of Alaska Southeast are the two partners we're working with. University of Alaska Anchorage is ready to pilot with us starting this spring. They are both offering a master's in educational leadership and a graduate certificate option. So there's two options for the related instruction. And our competencies for Alaska are aligned to our Alaska Administrator Standards and our Alaska Cultural Standards. Standard pathways to 1,000 hours of on-the-job learning, and we're anticipating about a 1 to 2 year program. Again, that core emphasis being that retention, the retention strategies. So where we're at so far in that process, because we were just approved, is we are preparing a pilot for this spring. University of Alaska Anchorage will start their pilot in the spring. University of Alaska Southeast in the fall. They're still going through some internal university approval processes. So spring of 2026, we have two districts that have come on so far for Alaska, and a third that we're in conversation with. It's looking like it'll align to where we started with our teacher pathway, 3 to 5 for the pilot. For our teacher pathway, that worked really well. We started with 3 to 5, and we are now at 27. So we started our teacher pathway, was approved in fall of 24 with a pilot in winter of 25. So we're just right on the heels of that with our principal pathway. For both our teacher and principal pathway, because as I shared, our remote rural districts is where we have the most acute turnover. That is our target for participants. We're really trying to build our programs in a way that we can target those with the highest and most acute turnover, and also really with the intent that if we can meet the needs of our most rural remote Alaska districts, we can always adjust that to meet the needs of our larger, more urban districts. But it's harder to go the other way. So if we build with that remote rural district in mind, we can always accommodate a larger district. And that's how it's worked with our teacher pathway. Our larger districts are starting to come on now. So the districts where we are targeting are districts that work primarily with remote rural districts. And just for context for Alaska, remote rural versus like rural hub means that they are communities that are accessible only by small plane or boat. May not have, the school may be the only location where there's internet in the community. Oftentimes, the districts have one school in each town. They're villages of, a few hundred people with very small schools. So that may be a K-12 school, one site in that town. So very rural, very remote in comparison with other parts of the country. And so when we're looking at that target, we're really thinking about how do we meet the needs of a district that is very remote, difficult to recruit people to because of location and facilities and resources that are available there. Many of those districts are primarily Alaska Native. Most of the students, our state is 40% Alaska Native, but some of those districts can be 90 to 100% Alaska Native students. So different population needs, which is why our cultural standards are a part of the foundation for our program. Funding, we are currently have a SAFE grant that goes through 2027. We've also have targeted state Title IIA funds to the program, and then we're working really closely with our Department of Labor and Workforce Development around resources. For our principal pathway, we're working closely with Peak Alaska Consulting, which is a organization here in Alaska that's helping us to build a mentor program that will train mentors, can help provide support for mentors that are in those rural remote communities, and also is working with us on embedding that retention strategies across the program. So they're working closely with us on that at this time. And so I already shared that we have our two universities that we've been working with, Peak Alaska Consulting. We also have two other sponsors in the state. I mean, there's other sponsors, but that are also working on the principal pathway and that have been helping us in the design and development of this. We have the Bristol Bay Regional Career and Technical Ed Consortium, which is a consortium of districts in Western Alaska that partner around career and technical education opportunities and apprenticeship for educators. And then our Sea Alaska Heritage Institute here in Southeast Alaska, and they are a tribal organization that one of the areas that they focus on is education support, and they have been participating in both our teacher and principal pathway development. That's kind of a overview of where we're at today, and I'll hand off to the next presenter.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. We appreciate that, and we'll come back to you with more questions, but awesome work that you are doing. Next up is Lori Maskey with the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. And thank you to David and his amazing team for inviting me to be here today to share a little bit about North Dakota's Registered Principal Apprenticeship Program. Currently, I'm serving as the Chief of Program Development and Growth, which is really just focused on looking for programs such as these to grow across the state. So next slide. Thanks, Ben. So just a little bit about our program. So as far as our core design, the Department of Public Instruction is the sponsor, and then our North Dakota universities are our lead preparation providers. There are only two universities in the state that offer masters in school leadership, University of North Dakota and North Dakota State University, and they both have grants with us currently. And then the school districts are the employer for this program. Our model is really based on a grow your own approach, where this allows the apprentices to remain in their community, continue to work in their school district, support themselves while they pursue their degree. And this is so important for a state like North Dakota because it is really difficult to hire teachers, counselors, principals, anybody in small rural districts. If you are not from there, if you did not grow up in that area, it's hard to convince people to move there. And so this approach looks for people who are already in that community. They obviously like it there. They want to stay there. So if we can grow them and help them attain their degrees, then obviously they're going to stay there, and that solves, their problem. And so that has just been a great approach for us. For this particular program, we're targeting individuals such as dean of students, assistant principals, instructional coaches. We have some special education directors, but more those, administrative type positions. Those are the ones that we're targeting with this program. As far as the why, North Dakota, unlike the other two that you're going to hear from today, we really don't have a principal shortage or retention problem. That's not why former Superintendent Basler and I kind of pursued this. It is mainly because we so believe in the apprenticeship model. And so, just thinking how wonderful it would be for somebody who is going to be a principal someday to have a full year to work under a highly qualified principal, walk in their shoes, see what it's like to be a principal, go to those school board meetings, learn about the supervision and the discipline, and just walk the walk for a whole year before you're officially put into that role. That was so enticing for us. And so they gain that hands-on experience. They get that in-depth mentoring and coaching. And, we just felt that this process really strengthened the principal preparation process. A benefit, of course, is that it creates a new pool of future principals for the state. Even though that wasn't our direct reason, it certainly helps as well. As far as funding, we are using the Title II funds. We also have a SAFE grant that we could tap into, but we're fortunate enough to be able to address our needs with our Title II dollars, and most of you know that in Title II, in addition to the admin, there's another 3% set aside for leadership activities. And so those are the dollars that we're tapping into for our principal apprenticeship program in North Dakota. So we currently have two programs, as I mentioned, UND and NDSU. So this is our third year of offering this grant. And so in the very first round, NDSU was the recipient. In the second year, only UND was the recipient. And now in this third year, we provided both of them with a grant. And so in this current school year, 25-26, UND is 9 apprentices working with 6 school districts, and NDSU has 13 apprentices working with 6 school districts. So both of them have been successful, have shown that they are successful in administering this program, and so we provided both of them with a grant for this current school year. Some of our successes that we've achieved through this program is we've just really strengthened our partnerships with those universities. As David mentioned, we worked with the National Center for Grow Your Own to develop that playbook, which was a great process. And we just did that so that other states and districts wouldn't have to start from scratch, like we did, being the first in the nation. And so they'd have a framework or a guideline to access, if they wanted to kind of help them through the process. Also the national guideline standards, which David mentioned. And so working with the National Center for Grow Your Own on those 2 initiatives has just been a true blessing. So another success is from years 1, 2, and 3 combined, 43 aspiring principals that will have gone through the program at the end of this year. So we just think that's wonderful. Excuse me. Some of our challenges. So sustainable funding, potentially. We all know that Title II is often on the chopping block. And so we always kind of wait nervously at this time of year to find out if Title II is going to be funded again. And so, thinking long term for a sustainable funding stream is always on our mind. Also, large versus small LEAs, they have very different needs. And so, in most cases, in the larger districts, the target population of assistant principals, they already have their master's in school leadership. So in that case, it's really applicable for the smaller districts. But then the larger districts, they have other positions like the special ed directors, the instructional coaches that make it a good fit. Also, we found out early on that we really needed to define our roles and responsibilities, especially that first year, because this was so brand new. And so in working with the universities and the school districts, they're like, okay, what is this? What do I have to do? I mean, there was just so many questions. And so what we created was an MOU. And so it outlines everybody's responsibility. So it goes through, and these are all the things that the state is responsible for. These are the things that the university system is responsible for. These are the things that the school district was responsible for. Everybody signs off on it. And so it just makes everybody aware of the responsibilities for the program. So that was a challenge that we overcame. As far as early successes, so that first year was more of a learning year, trial and error. And our final report that we requested wasn't nearly as comprehensive. We got a little bit much better the second year. And so we have a very comprehensive report from 24-25 from UND. And so they just had phenomenal success with their 10 apprentices that year. They had 100% completion rate. And the completion rate by far has been very high. These are individuals that, kind of already decided this is their path. They're very dedicated. And so that 100% has been a streamline throughout the whole process. 3.95 average GPA and 80% leadership placement. And so 80%, 8 out of their 10 participants last year were able to find leadership placement within the state of North Dakota. And so we're really excited about those outcomes, and just think that's a great rationale for continuing this program. So that's just a high-level overview of our principal apprenticeship program in North Dakota, and I will turn it over to the next presenter.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. Appreciate you sharing the great work happening. It's crazy to think you're on your third year already. Man, that's you're making me feel older than I already feel. And next up is Rob Gilstrap from Virginia Department of Education. We've had the privilege of supporting Virginia for the last, I think, 18 months now, if I'm not mistaken. And Rob, you're actually a former principal just like myself, and so you bring a certain lens to this work that I'm sure is based on your experience. And so, Rob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, David. As you said, I'm Rob Gilstrap. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Educator Workforce here in Virginia at the Virginia Department of Ed. I want to say thank you to David and especially Carla for your support for Virginia over the last couple of years and your ongoing work with us, not just on this project, but many other projects, even projects unrelated to Grow Your Own, especially Carla. I want to just definitely shout out to Carla. Um, when we're talking about some of the things that Virginia is doing, I want to step back just for a second, just like you said, and said, my role as a principal kind of gives me a different lens of what principal apprenticeship and school development, leadership development may need and may lack in. When we started here at Virginia with National Grow Your Own, we didn't start with principal apprenticeships. We started with teacher apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships for teachers. Then we also went para and principal. And so we've tried to have a full scope of the educational environment in mind as we develop these programs. We also in Virginia, and maybe many states have this, but we have been a very pro-education state over the last probably 20 or 30 years. And by that, I mean, our teachers at some point were required to have a master's degree to even be a teacher in Virginia. Not so much anymore, but because of that, we have a lot of teachers in buildings who already have master's degrees. So when we were looking at our principal apprenticeship program, we couldn't just create a program to help somebody get a master's. Those masters they already had. We needed something to help get them their post-baccalaureate and their administrative skills and experiences. So we focused on that first with the funding we had. We have a governor who has been very supportive of the apprenticeship process. We've had leadership at the state level, superintendents that have been very supportive of this process. And so in some ways, it's been easy for us. In other ways, it's not so easy because of the work so hard. Part of our funding has come from our SAFE grant, but even before that, we were using ESSER funds. And just like I believe it was Lori was saying, and maybe Kelly, that Title II funds were a big part and are a part of our plan going forward. But just to be clear on what we mean when we talk about our Virginia Registered Principalship program, we're talking about a lot of on-the-job training. When I went through my administrative program, I think I had somewhere around 50 hours of on-the-job training to go along with the book work and assessments that I had to take to become a principal. And though I was a teacher already, I really didn't know what it was like to be a principal. The principals that come out of these programs, the Virginia one, the Alaska one, and the North Dakota one, they know what it's like to be a principal for a full year. One of the negatives, this is even a problem with student teaching when we talk about teachers, is you only get a snippet of the year. And so you may learn a lot about, between February and April as a student teacher, but there's a lot of the year that you missed out on as being the teacher of record. Same thing goes for a principal. If you don't get to be on the job shadowing a principal from day one to the end of the day of the year, there are some very key and important things that you miss out on. And so part of this apprenticeship program is to give you a full scope of the role. We base our competencies, our on-the-job competencies, on the same requirements that a sitting principal or sitting assistant principal would have as their standards for their evaluation. We feel like if that's what we expect out of our principals and our assistant principals, once they have the job, that's the best focus we could have on preparing those to become that. Before I jump to the progressive wages, I also want to say in Virginia, and it may be the same in these other two states, but I know that not every state, the licensure type for a principal is the exact same licensure type for an assistant principal. And so is the education. If you go get your master's degree to be an administrator, it's the same degree, whether you're an assistant principal or a head principal. And those jobs can be very different depending on the divisions that you work in. And so we try to make sure that we expose our apprentice to assistant principal type roles, leadership roles, and head principal roles, because in most cases, they're not going to go from a apprentice to the leader of a building. They're going to have steps in between. For our progressive wages, we try to make sure that we're somewhere around that third year of teaching salary. Uh, David said at the beginning, their motto to help anybody that wants to become a teacher and get paid doing it. We believe the same thing for principals. And as a matter of fact, we believe it's the same thing for anybody that goes through education. So if we're talking about a para, we're talking about a teacher or a principal, and even if we ever had a division superintendent apprenticeship, I believe that we should try to find ways to pay them while they're learning how to serve students in their community. I already talked about our related technical instruction a little bit. And I will say that we started out with about $500,000 for our principal apprenticeship. I wish we would have started with a little bit more. I think we could have supported more with our the interest we saw out in the field. We allocated money for teachers, for pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships, and paras. And I just think that if I were to do it again, I'd probably put a little bit more into the administrative funds than I did the others. But we have been pretty successful. We have 37 participants right now across 17 school divisions and 6 different education preparation programs. Our work is a partnership with Virginia Works, which is the old Doley from previous names, but they've changed names. So the Department of Labor for Virginia and the Virginia Department of Education work very closely with our education systems and our divisions to accomplish our goals. And I'll turn it back to you, David.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And Lori and Kelly, also feel free to turn on your screen and come off mute. Um, all three of you, just want to say, continue to be big fans of your work. We've just been honored to get to work with you all over the years. Um, One of the things when, originally thinking about this work, was, Rob, some of the comments you made me think a lot about so I'm from Michigan. Most of you know that, being a diehard Detroit Tigers fan, I'm very clear about that. But I left New York City to accept an assistant principal job in Detroit Public Schools. And I arrive home, and this is, I arrive, and like 2 days later, the city declares bankruptcy. That was great. And about 2 months after that, the person that hired me, the assistant supe, fired the principal and said, "You're going to be the principal." Let's just say that was a uh, rude awakening. I had a master's degree in ed policy, but I did not have a master's degree in school leadership or anything like that. And in the state of Michigan, at least at the time, I can't speak to current, but you could become a principal as long as you enrolled in a program within 6 months and completed it within 3 years. So I was able to walk in, off the street basically, and be a principal, which was crazy. And then during my time in Tennessee, one of the things that was interesting, and this is going to sound very flippant, but it was correct. There was at the time within its licensure requirements for the principalship that you could literally become a principal by reading a book. What I mean by that is, yeah, you had to get a master's in school leadership, but there was no clinical internship or residency requirement. And so that was alarming. And I want to give a shout out to the Tennessee Department of Education today. Kelly, Rob, or you may have remembered they presented in December and included work on their principal registered apprenticeship program. So shout out to Brooke, Deanna, and Aaron, and Christy Brown and Commissioner Reynolds there. Really cool work they're doing today. And I think some of the things that worries me um, in this work is not having that hands-on experience. Rob, you talked about having 50 hours and versus what you've been able to change in Virginia today. So starting with you, Rob, what problems were you trying to solve that existing principal preparation pathways were not addressing? And then Kelly and Lori, I'll come to you all. Rob, go ahead.
Well, those that weren't able to join us before this call, we did talk about this a little bit. And one of the things we all discussed was we didn't necessarily have a shortage of people that had the administrator license. We had plenty of those within our state. I mean, even in my buildings, I would have probably 5 or 6 people that were licensed to be principals, but they didn't necessarily have the preparation or the experience to go along with that. So we weren't really like it's different with teachers. Teachers, you can post a position and you may not get any applicants for the position depending on what the role is. When I got my head principal job in Richmond, they told me there were 136 applicants for the position. Doesn't mean they were 136 that should have had the job. And the fact that they chose some cowboy from Oklahoma to come to Virginia tells me that maybe there were a lot of people that didn't qualify at that time if they were willing to take a risk on me. So we weren't trying to just fill the spot with bodies. That's not what we're doing with our principal apprenticeships. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a long continuity that also it goes very deep. One of our issues that we want is we want really high quality leaders developed through this, not just somebody who understands a couple of the theories of leadership, but somebody who can implement, adjust, transform a building through their leadership. So we wanted that through our leadership program. We wanted extended, deep preparation. So not like the 50 hours, we were looking at hundreds and thousands of hours so that there's not an aspect of being a principal that comes and shocks you. I used to joke when I was a principal, probably you too, David, is that no one day is the same. They're all different. Every day is different. But I will say this, they're a lot alike. They may not be the exact same day, but if you have the basic preparation, you can handle those differences. Whereas if you just got a very skeleton view of what a leader in a building is going to be, you're not going to be prepared for many things. We also wanted to develop an upward growth opportunity for our teachers and leaders. The Grow Your Own model is great for this because you're taking people who have already demonstrated a love for your building and your community, and also a desire to have a bigger role within the same place they're at. So when you do the Grow Your Own model, you allow your strong teachers that do want to go into leadership, even if they don't want to be principals, to grow and understand the full scope of the educational system that they work in. When I was a teacher, I thought I knew what it was like to be a principal just because I was in a classroom and I saw what kids were like and saw the principal in the hall. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so someone going through these programs would allow them a great opportunity to get in so deep that there's not that, oh, wow, I don't know if I'm ready for this feeling. And then the last thing that we try to accomplish through this is funding inequities. It's really hard for somebody who's living on a teacher salary to, number one, pay to go get a master's degree. And also, if that requires you to stop being a teacher or at least cut back on your teacher or your extra activities, like you might be a coach or a club sponsor, you might be like, while I'm getting my master's to be a principal, I can't do those things because I have to have the time to dedicate to my studies. The way this is structured, because it's drawn out a long time and because we're able to offset the expenses, it does clear up some of the funding inequities where some people that might have been a great principal but just didn't either have the financial support from their family or their role or just in life, we could help with that and still let them live out their dream to be a school leader.
Right. I love that last thing, especially, Rob. Like we always talk about how talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. Financial barriers should never get in the way of somebody becoming a principal or a teacher, etc. I also just want to say that sometimes picking a cowboy from Oklahoma is the best decision you can ever make. Again, sorry for the sports reference, Detroit Lions getting Barry Sanders, one of the best cowboys from Oklahoma Okay, I
True.
digress.
True.
With that said, I figured you'd appreciate that, Rob.
Yes.
Kelly, is there anything that you would care to add? I know you talked a little bit about the unique environment of Alaska and turnover, but is there anything you'd care to add about what problems you were trying to address that existing programs were not with your apprenticeship?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could second many of the things that Rob just shared. A lot of those factors apply for Alaska as well. One of the things Lori mentioned was just, the difficulty of recruiting people to remote areas is, I already kind of touched on that, and I know that that applies for others as well. But a thing that I would add for Alaska is kind of along the same lines of what Rob was sharing, where um, we have a lot of people with maybe the training, the education, but not the experience, right? So because of that high turnover, we're getting a lot of folks we have an emergency certificate for leadership in our state. So we're getting people in on an emergency certificate that are stepping into leadership, oftentimes with the minimum teaching experience that is required. So it's partly that they're coming into these roles, they're coming into leadership anyway. How could an apprenticeship uh, create some more structure around supporting them so that they can be more successful? And we know that that's part of what contributes to that 55% turnover is the pressures and the skills to be really confident and take on those leadership roles, knowing when you can delegate to someone, not taking it all on your shoulders, those kinds of things that a mentor can help work through with someone. Why are you owning this piece? Why aren't you working with the teachers in your school to take on some of these pieces, to grow their skills, take some of the things off your plate? Some of those kinds of conversations around, and it's again that retention piece, right? So how do we work with those that are on an emergency certificate or are the person that could end up being on that emergency certificate? How do we get ahead of that by growing those individuals in their community that are already willing to live in that place? Maybe they're from there, they already have ties to the community. They're already demonstrating leadership by taking on some of the leadership responsibilities in their district or in their school. So how do we create that wraparound support so that when they end up in that leadership position, they have that mentor relationship already in place. They've already built some strong skills through the apprenticeship. When they step into it, they already are further along that path. And it kind of goes back to the way that you've talked, David, about the teacher pathway, eliminating that first year teacher, right? It's that same idea of how can we get them the support so that when they step into that leadership position, they're further along in their skills, and when the reins come off, they are more confident and more likely to be successful in that space. So I think for us that piece of having a lot of individuals with the credential, but many of those that are ending up in those leadership positions are coming in with they meet the 3-year minimum of teaching experience. They just completed their admin credential, and then they're thrown in as the principal in a community where that's the only leadership seat. So if the apprenticeship can get them the credential with more support, with more of that connection between their learning and their experience, when they get into that seat, they're more likely to be successful. And then with that retention piece, build a strong culture in their community to reduce turnover across the board. So that's what I would add for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so much of what you're saying, Kelly, is sparking my PTSD from when I was a principal, just being thrown in, and nobody should go through that. There's some of the stuff you said that I actually want to, if okay with the panelists, I'm going to jump around on the questions. But Lori, I'm going to come to you. Kelly was talking a lot about, folks being prepared and being set up for success. I'm curious, in the work in North Dakota, how are apprentices assessed throughout the program, and who ultimately decides when they are ready to advance?
Well, I think in North Dakota in our program, there are a multitude of staff involved in that assessment process. I recently actually went out to do a site visitation to one of our programs at UND, and they just blew me out of the water at the quality of their program. So, as part of the RFP process, they are required to have a mentoring program, of course, for the apprentices. Well, at UND, they get a triple dose. And so they have a mentor assigned to them at the university. They have the principal that they're working under that is also mentoring and supporting them. And then they hired a residency coach to work with all of them that was an in-kind contribution from the university. So they didn't even, it just really speaks to the commitment, of the school districts, of the universities of this program, that they have this triple dose of mentoring process, when they didn't even receive funding for that. They found other ways to fund that. And so, the apprentices are assessed, of course, by their professors in the coursework that they're taking to get their master's in ed leadership. They're assessed by the principal that they're working under. They're assessed by the university contact mentor that they're assigned, by the residency coach. So I just think there's a lot of people that they're getting feedback from and getting that assessment from to make sure that, they're highly qualified when they're done. Ultimately, it's the responsibility of the school district, to decide, if they're going to, move on and be successful and successfully complete the program. But I think there's a lot of people involved in that process.
Emphasize too the importance. It's something you said, but I want to call attention to it. That in-kind support you got from the university hiring a residency coach, that's the benefits of running, competitive grants. Like it's amazing to see how, when you all say jump, how universities can quickly say how high when there's money you have to award. Rob, on your slide, if I'm not mistaken, you said it was $510,000 for 37 individuals. I mean, that comes out to less than, and let me be clear, I was a high school English teacher, so I might get this wrong, but that comes out to less than, I think, $15,000 a person, which that's pretty awesome. And if I'm wrong, I'm not off by much. And so running those competitive grants can dramatically save you all money on costs and programmatic quality. And so I just want to emphasize that for those who are on this call, is if you're coming from a state or district, you have in Virginia, there are multiple EPPs to pick from. And so being able to run that competitive grant can really make a big difference. Kelly, you talked a little
David?
bit about, oh, go ahead, Rob.
I just wanted to pop something in on what she just said too, because
Yeah.
there's some very strong similarities with Virginia. Just one. We also, I mean, we do the university supervisor. We have mentors that are all part of the evaluation process. We expose our apprenticeships to special ed coordinators, EL coordinators, to get some of those more unique learning experiences. But we also do two things. One, they have to do a self-evaluation. We want to know where they think they are. And lastly, we also tie their progression to their wage. So we increase their wage as they meet certain milestones and competencies. So there's that drive to, hey, I want to display that I can do this and I can show this because I'll make more money when I do that. So just wanted to throw that in there with that as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Kelly, you had also shared about a mentoring group. I think it was, if I remember correctly, Peak Alaska, and I apologize if I got that wrong, that you have in place helping with the principal mentors. Kelly, I'm going to come to you on this next question. And again, to the panelists, sorry that I'm jumping around, but just recognizing time. Kelly, what decisions would you make differently if you were designing this program again today? The thing we always wish, knowing what I know now, what would I have done?
Oh, that's a good question. We're still very much in that iteration, and I think that that's something. I don't know that we're at a place where we could say, "Wow, we should have done this," because we're still iterating. And I think one of the benefits we have, and I hope this for other states as they go down this path, is we're such a small state. We have such close relationships. As we're coming up against barriers, we're just iterating with our partners, and they're coming right along with us. And so we're just keeping really open dialogue. We have a regular once a month check-in with our university partners and our districts, and then those like consulting agencies. We meet all of us together and we just talk through like what's working, what are the barriers, what do we need to address, and then if it's a system barrier, who do we work with? How can we push on the system barrier? If it's a programmatic approach, we've been working closely with our National Center for Grow Your Own Partners on creating tools and resources, and we just bring them like, here's what we're working on, here's what we're thinking. Give us feedback. What do you think? What is this gonna look like in your district at the university? And so I think for us, we're not at a place yet where we could say, gosh, we should have done this differently. But very much in that space of iterating on it and working through what are the kinks, what are the things that are coming up as barriers. And so that's one thing that we've had the luxury with our partners of meeting us in that space and iterating with us that I can say has been working really well for Alaska.
Yeah, and I do just want to add that kudos to you and your colleagues for creating that conditions for collaboration. Like that doesn't happen naturally. Uh, and I know Miles and I in the past have maybe been on a couple 8 p.m. meetings due to the time difference with those collaborators, but it's just awesome to see how many people are vested in Alaska. Kelly, I'm going to stick with you then on this next one, and then Lori, I'll come to you, then Rob. Kelly, because still in some iteration aspects, as you said, how do you think about the balance between scale versus quality in this space?
Yeah. That's a great question. And for us, we're very much working to start with that small scale. We did that with our teacher pathway, and we were able to move really rapidly to launch, ramp that up. But we started with 3 districts, 5 apprentices for our teaching, which I'm sure for other states is just an extremely small pilot. But because we started so small, we were able to work really closely with those districts, work through the challenges that they were coming up against. We were able to build on that. And so we do have more structures in place as we launched the principal pathway, but we're starting same space, like 3 to 5, with the intent of being able to get those kinks worked out so that we can get that quality in place and then ramp it up fast like we did with teaching. So that's been the approach we've taken for Alaska. Start really small, work through the kinks, get those programmatic decisions in place, and then we can expand and launch wide.
Lori, you're in. Thank you for that, Kelly. Lori, you're 3 years in. As you've been growing, how are you balancing scale versus quality?
So, obviously both are important, but I think at this point we're a little more focused on quality versus scale because as far as scaling it out, we only have the 2 universities in the state that offer it, and we're working with both of them already. We have a set amount of Title II funds to put toward this program, and we're maxing out the funding there. So there's not tons of room to be able to scale it out and grow. So we've just been really focused on, improving the quality of the program. And, no better example of that than through opportunities like this, David, you providing these webinars and being able to hear from my peers and other states is what they're doing. I just, thanks. Was it Rob that said they do the self-assessment? So we are going to be doing that from now on. So it's just listening to, other states and getting good ideas so that we can continue to refine and improve upon the quality of our program.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. Rob?
Same question, like scale versus quality.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, when we started this, we weren't even thinking about principals. So, and our goal was less than this 37. We were pleasantly surprised with how many principals we were able to get in this first round. And at the same time, we were also working on another project that Carla actually has supported me on, which we call the Principles of Distinction, which is a program for principals within our state that are at the highest level, the most decorated, the most successful, outgoing type principals. And there's a program that they go through. And we also have our Office of School Quality, which is working with principals in buildings that are really struggling. And so we have these 3 different lenses and 3 different groups of principals all at the same time. And to bring them together it would seem like we have a large scale of principal development going on here. But as we're having them bend themselves around and work together with each other, it just becomes a more tighter knit group instead of just a large spread out all across the Commonwealth. So we're just trying to we're hoping that the apprenticeship principal doesn't necessarily go straight to a school division that's struggling and becomes that next group, and then over years has to become, the rock star principal. But we're hoping that each of them, with all their different issues and strengths, can help, create a more cohesive administrator view across the Commonwealth. But for us, we don't want to get so far out that we can't support it. We have a pretty small office. Even though we have a lot of things we do out of my office, we don't have a lot of manpower. So if we extend that too far, then we have to start depending on people that maybe or may not be able to support our principals. We have partnered with both our principal associations and our superintendent associations, and they've supported us a little bit in this process. But we have this fear that if we get it too big, people are super excited about these programs. And if we just had unlimited funds, it could easily get out of control, and we no longer have a high quality program, and then it would lose its value. So we are really holding tight to what we can do with the manpower we have, but make it as deep and as quality as we can.
Yeah, I love that point, Rob, because unfortunately we have seen that in the teacher space where growth has superseded quality in many cases. You literally have folks approving programs for, oh, well, this was an emergency hire teacher, so we're going to use apprenticeship dollars so that they can get their certification. They're acting as a teacher of record on day one. That is not an apprenticeship. And we're seeing that in certain places across the country. And so I'll just use this to say, if you noticed, Lori saying, hey, I'm going to beg, borrow, and steal that self-evaluation idea from Rob. Um, Having done this work now for basically 7 years, about 3 years in Tennessee and 4 years now as NCGYO, and getting to work with amazing folks like Carla and Ben, and Miles and Ashley and Missy and Juliana and Lynn. Never would have thought I'd get to work with two National Teachers of the Year. I just want to flag that there are no experts in this space. There are just people with more lessons learned. And if you want to know who to learn from, you're at the right place because you're hearing Kelly, Lori, and Rob talk about what they're doing, the lessons learned, and even if you notice them learning from each other. Unfortunately, I have seen a lot of outside. It never gets easier. You just get better. I love that, Rob. I continue to see various groups try to, and I'm talking outside nonprofits, for profits, even some universities that are just trying to use apprenticeship to increase their enrollment. They're not trying to change their practice. And so I will always take the side of the practitioner. It's not the critic who counts. It's the man in the arena or the woman in the arena. And so I just want to, as we wrap this up, say to Kelly, Lori, Rob, to the other members of the National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching State Network, to the SEAs and SAAs across the country trying to do this work, you are the experts. You're the closest to it. And for those on this call, don't go to blank policy organization or blah, blah, blah. Go to those who are actually doing the work. I continue to be blown away by the leadership that these panelists and others are doing. And I just have to say that, like, the whole goal in this work, always remember, it's about the students, making sure students get not only the teachers they need and deserve. And why does anyone leave any job? They leave because of who they work for. And so investing in principal apprenticeships, if done well, if quality, as you heard from Laura, Kelly, and Rob, that's going to lead to teacher retention. And that's what this is about. We want to recruit new people into the occupation, into the profession, and then we want to keep them so that kids thrive. It all comes down to students. Just always remember that. Listen to those in the field that are actually doing the work, not the Monday morning quarterbacks or the people that get paid by foundations to write random reports. Talk to the practitioners. If you want to hear more, come to New Orleans. It's going to be warm. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great time. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this. Really appreciate that. Feel free to contact us if we can be helpful. Rob, Kelly, Lori, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being vulnerable. And thank you for the leadership and all the kids, thousands of kids you are impacting through your teacher and principal registered apprenticeship work. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day. Bye now.